Lucas Harper wasn't the kind of man who believed in ghost stories. As a seasoned real estate agent specializing in distressed properties, he had seen it all: crumbling mansions, abandoned warehouses, and forgotten estates. But when his boss sent him to assess Willow Manor, an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, even Lucas couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that settled in the pit of his stomach. The manor had been on the market for over 20 years, each potential buyer backing out with wild stories of strange noises, flickering lights, and the chilling sensation of being watched. Lucas, however, was determined to prove those tales wrong. He prided himself on his professionalism, and nothing, especially not silly ghost stories, was going to stand in his way. The moment he pulled up the gravel driveway, the sky turned an ominous shade of gray. The towering silhouette of Willow Manor loomed ahead, its once grand facade now crumbling under the weight of decades of neglect. Vines snaked up the sides, clutching onto the broken windows like skeletal fingers. Lucas grabbed his flashlight, tightened his coat, and approached the massive, creaking front door. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and decay. The wooden floorboards groaned beneath his boots as he stepped into the grand foyer, its faded wallpaper peeling like dead skin. A chill ran down his spine, but he brushed it off as a draft from the cracked windows. He was here for a job, after all. "All right, let's see what this place has to offer," Lucas muttered to himself, trying to break the silence that seemed to swallow every sound. He started on the first floor, inspecting the rooms and making mental notes about the extensive repairs needed. As he ventured deeper into the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time he turned a corner, he half expected to see someone, or something, lurking in the shadows. But each time, the hallway was empty, only the echo of his footsteps filling the silence. Finally, he made his way to the second floor. As he reached the top of the staircase, a loud thud echoed from one of the rooms down the hall. Lucas paused, his heart racing. The logical part of his brain told him it was just the house settling, but something else, a primal instinct, warned him to leave. Ignoring his instincts, he cautiously approached the source of the noise. The door to one of the bedrooms was slightly ajar, swaying as if nudged by an unseen hand. He pushed it open, revealing a dark, dust-covered room. A large antique mirror stood against the wall, its surface cracked and marred with black streaks. As Lucas stepped inside, the temperature plummeted, his breath misting in the air. His flashlight flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. "Damn it," he muttered, fumbling to tap his flashlight back to life. When it finally flickered back on, the beam of light caught something in the mirror, a shadow moving behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. "Hello," Lucas called, his voice shaky. There was no response, only the oppressive silence pressing in around him. He turned back to the mirror, heart pounding. For a split second, he saw his reflection, but it wasn't quite right. His eyes were darker, his face twisted into a sinister grin he wasn't making. The reflection leaned closer, as if trying to step through the glass. Lucas stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from his grasp and clattering to the floor. The sound seemed to break the spell, and when he looked again, the mirror showed only his own terrified face. He had had enough. Grabbing his flashlight, he hurried out of the room, slamming the door behind him. He decided to make a quick sweep of the remaining rooms and get out of there as fast as he could. But as he turned the corner into the hallway, he heard it, a soft, childlike giggle echoing through the air. Lucas froze. The laughter was coming from the attic. He didn't want to go up there. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to leave the house, to never look back. But he was determined to prove to himself that it was just an old, creaky house and nothing more. Taking a deep breath, he made his way up the narrow staircase to the attic. The attic was pitch black, the only light coming from his sputtering flashlight. As he swept the beam across the room, he caught glimpses of old furniture, broken toys, and thick cobwebs hanging like ghostly veils. The giggle came again, this time directly behind him. He whirled around to find a small, porcelain doll sitting in the middle of the floor, its glassy eyes staring straight at him. Lucas was sure the doll hadn't been there when he entered the room. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to move closer. "Just a doll," he whispered, trying to convince himself. But as he reached out to pick it up, the doll's head jerked to the side, its eyes blinking. Lucas yelped, dropping it as if it had burned him. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut, trapping him inside. The temperature plummeted even further, and a thick mist began to rise from the floor, swirling around his legs. From the mist, shadowy figures began to emerge, their forms flickering like static on an old television screen. "Leave. Now," a voice whispered, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as he backed up against the wall. The shadows drew closer, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of anger and pain. With a burst of adrenaline, Lucas bolted toward the door, desperately trying to wrench it open. But it was as if the house itself was holding it shut, refusing to let him go. He could feel icy fingers brushing against the back of his neck, cold breath on his ear. In a final act of desperation, Lucas turned and screamed, "I'm leaving. I'll never come back." As suddenly as it began, the mist receded, and the door flew open. Lucas didn't hesitate. He sprinted down the stairs, through the darkened hallways, and out the front door, never looking back. The moment he crossed the threshold, the oppressive weight lifted from his shoulders, and the air outside felt almost warm in comparison. Breathing heavily, he looked back at the house. The windows seemed to watch him, dark and malevolent, as if daring him to return. He swore he saw a shadow move in one of the windows, but he didn't care. He jumped into his car and sped away, leaving Willow Manor and its cursed secrets behind. When he returned to his office the next day, he handed in his resignation. "Find someone else to sell that damned house," he told his boss, refusing to explain further. The haunted look in his eyes was enough to convince them not to press for details. As he drove home that evening, his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. Hesitantly, he opened it. "You promised to return. We're waiting." Lucas's hands trembled as he deleted the message, but deep down, he knew that no matter how far he ran, the curse of Willow Manor would follow him.